So even if you've been living under a rock, you know, like the two most exciting words, maybe three, if you put in a cloud in there, is data and AI. And our guest today is joining us to discuss how to build a career in to build it out. So essentially, the the beauty of today's show essentially will be to get to the bottom of what it takes to build a career in cloud and in data and AI. And she does a lot of amazing content on this, and I think you'll find it exciting. Welcome to the stream, Ebere.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, excited to have you. So diving straight into this, two-part question. Why did you get interested in data and why did you choose to build a career that route? And what inspired you to share your knowledge with, everyone on LinkedIn, Instagram, etc.?
Why did I get into data? So first, my background is actually in computer science. A lot of people think I'm a transitioner. I'm not. I'm actually like working in what I went to school for.
Mm,
Um, I think I chose data because after I graduated and I tried to do CS and software, I just realized that I didn't really like software, right? I didn't like to build software, but data was, I think, still in my field, but it didn't require as much technical depth as software did. So for me, it was like a very good career where I could still have my technical skills, but I wasn't like the software engineer person. You know what I mean? So it was a
mm,
really good career path for me because I really wanted to work with like my degree, right? And I didn't want to be a software engineer. So when I found data, I was like, yeah, this is perfect. I'm still like uh, coding because at that time I wanted to code when I started my career anyway. I'm still doing all the like technical stuff that I really liked. But I'm not a software engineer because I really didn't like the idea of being a software engineer. So that was the main reason why I chose data. Yeah.
mm. And kind of like I like how you put it together. So using that as a model, if you were advising someone new or a career transitioner to use like that the specific term, how would you advise them to think about their skill sets and what they want to do in tech and finding the opportunity for that as a model?
I think it's important to actually know where you are and where you're going to thrive, right? Because like there are so many things that you can do in tech. It's not just data, like you can do program management, product, like there's so many things. I think when I'm talking to people who are looking to actually start their career in tech, the first thing I always say is you have to do a self-assessment, right? What do you have? What are you actually bringing into like the space that you're going to? What best translates to like what's gonna enable you to make the smoothest transition, right? So that would be the first thing that I recommend. It's not just about what you enjoy, but also what's going to help the transition happen. Because you might choose something that you enjoy, but it's not fulfilling, right? But if you are actually doing something, like for me, I think one of the benefits of why I actually stuck through data was because to me it was a breath of fresh air compared to like what I envisioned for my career. Like data was like, oh my god, this is so much easier. Like it's a piece of cake. So that helped me to just continue going. So I think that that's a key part of actually transitioning. Just figuring out where you are and what's going to help you make like a smoother transition.
Mm. And what are those steps, right? For anyone thinking to do it. So like you talk about the self-assessment. And by the way, shameless plug, I do have a video that I did about an assessment on the channel. So go check it out. I think it's really, really helpful for you to kind of like do like a skills assessment before even thinking about what opportunities are out there. But beyond that, what are then like the steps to kind of like go from, I'm interested in X to like getting a job in that role?
I think there's also another self-assessment that has to happen for that part as well. And what I would recommend everybody needs a tailored solution. So what works for, I imagine, even using you as an example, like your journey must be very different from mine, right? So everybody needs a tailored solution. So my recommendation would be, figure out, you still need to assess where you are, because if you, some people have more privileges than others. So, and what's going to help them to be successful is not the same as going to have some help someone who maybe doesn't have any degree, maybe doesn't have anybody that can open doors for them, you know, like, so you have to know where you are before you even um, put together a strategy or whatever. And I think it's important that we have that conversation even more, because there's so many people giving advice online, and it can be misleading, because you might take advice from someone and you don't know, like, the
Ingredients that went into the advice.
exact, you don't know, this person may have done this maybe 10 years ago, and the truth of the matter is that things don't work that way in 2025, right? So it worked in whatever time they did that, but like things change. It's just this, it's complex. So I think what works for person A is not going to work for person B. I don't like to tell people that, hey, this is the secret sauce, this is what's going to help you get, you know what I mean? Because I feel like that's misleading. You have to access yourself. If you have a degree, I think your strategy should be different from those that don't. You have even your university can play a, like, it can help you. I know, like, someone on TikTok, I saw a video where she was saying, oh, I have never applied for a job, I just like got my first job. And then I looked into her background. She went to an Ivy League school, like, she has such a, like, an amazing break. I'm like, you're not supposed to apply to more than 2 jobs. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're
You
not,
have the golden ticket.
you can't give advice to someone who's like, come on now, that's super misleading. So I think there's a lot of self-assessment that still has to happen, even with tailoring your strategy.
You know, there's something that you touched on there that, you know, I'd probably like you to expand a little more on, because I think there's even a layer that even talking about it, I probably don't talk about this as much, but I think you kind of like uncovered it, right? Because beyond the skills, beyond everything else that needs to be figured out in this process, I think one part that can be overlooked is the role of course, and I know it's hard to do because you have to first figure out where you are specifically in your journey, right? But I
Mhm.
think beyond that level, there's now that almost game behind the game where you have to figure out what is it that, you know, I have as my special skill. So let me give an example. Like, let's say you used to be an admin and you've been an executive assistant to like a VP in a technology company. So now you have all these connections. If you want to become a product manager, right, which essentially might still be switching to tech in a sense, even though you already work within the space, you have a lot more resource in terms of people that you can leverage.
Right.
Same for someone who went to Ivy League school and maybe was in like education transition into tech. While they may not have like the connection, they have the name brand recognition. So I think it's important to kind of like highlight what those positives and negatives might be, because if you don't have a network, that's a negative, but it's not like a sentence, right? It's just you figuring out where am I deficiency and how do I build up. So do I need to go to more meetups or go to more conferences? So how important is just that whole idea around not just even like the skill mapping, but like the career mapping aspect of it?
I think it's super important. And I'm glad you touched on that. And you even have like a really good example, because I think that's one of the gaps we have in like the career space, right? And people just come and they give very generic advice, like, you need to do this. And I feel so bad for like people who are starting their careers, because it's just, I can't even imagine the level of overwhelm that they go through with like, oh, myself, I give advice. So sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I hope I don't mislead anybody. But it's I, like you said, it's important to know that you need a tailored strategy. I think that's one of the biggest things you can take away, right? So if your gap might be the network, your gap might be the skills, your gap might be soft skills, your gap might be technical skills. Everybody has a different gap. And so that tailored strategy, I think we should promote more of, hey, your strategy A that works for this person may not necessarily work for you, but you just need to figure out where your gap is and tailor your strategy according to like what your gap is.
Yeah, I completely agree with that perspective. And it's interesting, someone in my network who's actually been on the podcast before recently got a new role, left their old role, now in a new one. And what I heard, they shared the strategy online, 47 applications in like maybe 3 to 4 months, 15 interviews, and they got an offer. And it was interesting because you look at 47 applications without any context and it feels like rookie numbers. Like I could do 47 applications in a day. But then you look at the return on that investment, right, which is 15 interviews, and like, you know what, maybe you don't want to do 4,000 applications. You could do 47 and get 15 because that's a better return. That's like one interview for every 3 applications. So,
Right. And that's rare, by the way. That shouldn't be a standard. Like
yeah.
that's very, very. I don't know too many people that do 3 applications and get an interview. At least in 20, even in 2025. Like, so he's an outlier. I don't know if it's a he or she.
Yeah.
He's an outlier, and I don't
Yep.
think that should be the standard for like everybody.
Everybody, and that's what I mean about strategy, because now he's a developer advocate who's very strong on relationship building. So you imagine that every single application is coming with research. He's probably finding the person directly hiring for the role, probably having an intro. And so again, and this is what I like to talk about, is like there's no right or wrong approach. Like if you're a blast and pray person, blast and pray. If you're like a proper research, put in the time, get to know the role, get to know the people hiring, make sure you're the perfect fit, then do that. If it's networking, because there's people literally who only get jobs off of networking. They talk to these people, this person knows one person, they talk to that person. But I think ultimately it's also knowing what you're comfortable with, because for you to do a lot of that work in building up that pipeline, it takes a toll on you when you get no, right? Because if you spend 2 hours on a job application, which is not typical, and then they turn you down, so it means 3 job applications seem like just 3 job applications, but that's 6 hours, right? That's literally a whole day's job.
And the thing is, if you're doing the tailored strategy where you're researching the person, trying to like actually like get in front of the person hiring, that's not 2 hours worth of work. So there needs to be more context. If you're like
Yep.
in relationships, maybe the relationships have been built over the course of 4 or 5 years. Right? That's not 2 hours of work. There's no
Yep.
way. Right. And the reason I don't knock off the blast and praise, like you kind of phrased it,
Strategy.
for people, that's their only like they don't know anybody. You know what I mean?
Yep.
They are literally, it has to be a numbers game for them. I
Yep.
think that there should be some strategy still, but except you want to wait 2 3 years and build a
Mhm.
network, and you know what I mean, like
Mhm.
please blast and pray. There's nothing wrong with that.
Because ultimately too, right, like I'm not even gonna be like shamed or anything about it. Like my current role was a blast and pray. Like I was just applying to a whole bunch of jobs, right, and then I got one. Interestingly too, at the same time it was a hybrid approach, right? So I was also interviewing, and I got a lot of good quality referrals that actually got me interviews at like some top companies. But those roles didn't work out, because you have to understand too, getting in the door, like right now, getting an interview is even like the hardest thing. Forget about getting the job, just like getting someone to talk to you, right?
Right.
But
Right.
that's only half the job, because a lot of times, if you think how hard it is for you to get in front of a recruiter or hiring manager, it's just as difficult for everybody else. So most of the people who are going to get there are going to be top quality candidates
Yeah.
anyway. So the fact that you even make it into that loop, and that's the other part that most people don't look at. He got 15 interviews to talk about his thing, but he only got one offer at the end of the day, right? So there were 14 other interviews where he probably got to final stages and things like that that didn't work out. So I think that's kind of like a lot of context. And I like what you said too, like even the years, like people who got into tech in 21, and they have a completely different experience that nobody else. It's a unique experience. Nobody else will ever have that. It
True.
was like it was 2021 for getting jobs in tech was like 2000 for partying. You know.
Right. It was the best time to actually get in, in my opinion. Like 2021 was like the golden era. Like if you were, there was no job market. Everybody was.
Like, what do you mean you've heard the word JavaScript? Hired.
You could get a job so quickly, so quickly. So it's super interesting to actually see how things have changed over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So kind of like switching gears a little bit, right? What are if you think about building a data career, because some of the things that I hear these days, it's like, all the different data roles, if you think about like data engineering, data analysts, data scientists, like those roles are morphing. What's your view on that?
I definitely think they are, especially with like the different advancements. I remember like a time where um like the tools are evolving as well, right? So the roles have to evolve. One thing that I have seen with analytics specifically is becoming more domain centric. So they're like, they don't just want someone who knows how to like work with data. You have an advantage if you maybe understand the industry. They'll probably go with someone who understands the industry better than someone who just knows how to work data.
Hmm.
They are definitely like, and it's also more competitive, right? It's no longer like the way it was in 2021. So they're changing. The tools are evolving now. AI can do a lot of things in terms of like analytics. So again, what your strength really is like the industry, not necessarily like helping to like everybody can visualize data or like, you know what I mean. So like you're bringing more of, okay, I understand finance data, I
Hmm.
understand data in the transportation industry, I understand
Hmm.
like, how to work with marketing data, I understand sales data. Like I think those kind of like, especially in the data space, those niche domain
Areas.
expertise, yeah, that's really where I'm seeing a lot of people have a lot of success. So it's
Hmm.
changing. It's changing for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also symptomatic of the job market is that if I'm a marketing director and I'm hiring a data analyst and there's one who's worked in marketing, there's one who hasn't, it just makes my life easier because like we can talk context, very deep context in an interview versus like speaking about just your data skills. And I think
Right.
finance industry too, right? Like do you understand visualize it, data governance, lineage management, like all of these other things that like we really care about very deeply beyond just your ability to maybe visualize the data or show a spreadsheet or whatever the case may be. Like we want that extra,
Yeah.
and if we can get it, like why shouldn't we?
And they can't get it because the market is tough, right? So I agree completely with you. It's definitely a challenging market for sure.
And so in terms of then working back, right? So, I'm literally like fresh. Let's say I used to work in retail. I want to become a data analyst today. I hear everything that we've been talking about it being challenging, but I still want to do it, right? What
Mhm.
is that? What is that step by step? Let's say data analyst, right? I want to become a data analyst today. What do I need to be focused on?
So this is how I typically would make my recommendation. The skills are important, yes. Hard skills, soft skills. You need to, obviously, people still want people that can work the tools. So typically, Excel is a really good place to start. You definitely need to know SQL across all the data roles. I think that depending on the company and where they are, cloud is a really good one. Some companies like their data is in the cloud, so they'll obviously hire someone that already knows how to work data in the cloud. Um, Another thing that I would say, like really good soft skills and communication skills. I've noticed like a push of people are trying to get people to kind of uh, not prioritize hard skills as much And I understand why I think it's valid, because when you think about it, you can, like, a lot of the things I know I learned by working. Now, I did a lot of projects, I did a lot of like self teaching, but did it really teach me anything? The majority of my knowledge I actually gained like when I got a job and when I started working, right? So
Mm,
I think these companies too know that you're going to learn anyway, right?
mm,
So being just a likable person, I think, is like the top tier thing. Having like um that personality that people just want to work with you. And I think sometimes a lot of hiring managers will pick that even over the skills, over even
mm,
someone that is like overly qualified and has like all the, because they know that, oh, if you eventually join the team, you can integrate well. They can train you if there's a need for it, over time. Um, the culture of your company, the company you want to work for too, is also important. So there are a lot of nuances, but I would say like just have everything, so that like regardless of if this company is asking for XYZ, you have it to show, right? If this one is asking for XYZ, which is super overwhelming, but that's just what it has to be. The skills, the tools, the personality, the work ethic, everything is an advantage. And when I talk about to reiterate the skills in terms of like requirements, I think the core will be to start out Excel, SQL, and I think cloud. These three ones are like just really good foundational ones that you can start with.
mm. And speaking of that, because again, it sounds like a lot, right? And maybe some come before and some come after. But if someone was thinking about it, like, for example, you're ready when you can start to apply for jobs. When is that time?
I don't recommend that you wait until you're ready. And I know a lot of people may not agree with this, right? But I say start applying the minute you know that you want to make a transition. You don't have to wait to be ready to apply, because like I said, there are people that they know they can train you, right? They know they can train you. They're really just looking for passion. They're looking for um like company fit, culture
Mm,
fit, or someone that can come and integrate and work well with them, right? I recently was talking to someone who's hiring, and she was like, no, we're not looking for, it's a data role actually. And she was like, we don't want like an expert, we just want someone who can sit on the calls and gather requirements and do this. And like every role is so unique that you don't know, you might just get the opportunity. So waiting before you're ready, or like waiting until you're ready, you're already losing time. Like you could have applied for like, I don't know, 15 jobs, or even more. Don't wait until you're ready. Like start the minute, my recommendation anyway. And I don't, like, I know everyone has a different strategy, right? But I feel the minute you feel like you're ready, as you're learning, document what you're learning on LinkedIn, right? You don't have to be an expert to start talking about, hey, I'm learning this. Let people see that and that's the best way to make a transition, a pivot, right? Because it's like done publicly, where people now start to identify you with a certain, if it's data, like data skills, right? Okay, this guy was working in retail, but he talks more about data now, a lot more. So like you're doing that rebrand, even though you just don't want to pop up one day and say, hey, I'm a data analyst, no, but people can see the transition happening. Like I'm learning, I'm looking for a job, I'm applying. Don't wait at all. Like the minute you decide that this is what you want to do, start looking for jobs, start applying, start documenting what you're learning.
I think you bring up a really, really good point. And like, to be honest, I know it might not be everybody's cup of tea, but I'm 1,000% aligned. I think one of the biggest mistakes and biggest sins that a lot of people make when they're transitioning into tech, and it's not like their fault making that mistake, because clearly, like, you could never think like there's no other main job or like high paying job where you can literally just walk off the street and start tomorrow. But
Right.
tech is one of those roles, right? Or one of those places. And I think applying super early does two things. There's a psychological aspect that really forces you to start being that person, right? In
Mm,
fact, we sent out a newsletter today that was literally about take aspiring out of your bio.
right.
Nobody's ever gonna hire you if you're aspiring,
That's true.
because you don't even believe that you're that. And you have to believe that you're him. You have to believe that you're her. Like, if you don't even believe, how can I believe, right? Help me get there. So there's a very big thing about getting ready, becoming that person that you want them to hire. And I think that's the first part. The second part is when you start to look at those requirements before hiring, there's patterns that start to come to you. And if you're a data analyst, as you were using as an example, now you're even doing like more, maybe it's not like, hardcore data analytics, but you're doing some filtering, right? You're prioritizing for certain skills and going harder. So even in your learning journey, maybe now you're saying like, the ability to filter data or do this. Now you start to look at those functions more. So even your learning journey is being tailored by what you're seeing in the job descriptions. So
Right.
you're literally gaining and the most interesting part, like getting a job is luck. Like most people will tell you, because this is the lucky part about it. It's not luck in the sense that you're not gonna have any skills and somebody's gonna just wake up and say, "Oh, give that person a 200,000 salary and let them start tomorrow." That's not what I mean. I mean luck meaning like opportunity meeting preparation.
Preparation, yeah.
Even if you prepare, but you don't put yourself in the right situation to meet the opportunity, you will never find it. Like if you don't contest to be president, you can be president. It's that simple. Like you have to buy the form, you have to go through the process. So it's the same thing. It's like if you're not putting yourself in those environments, like there may be a job that might say, we don't prioritize experience as much. We just want someone who can come in and do it. And maybe they might not pay as well. But guess what? You now have the most prized possession, which is experience.
Mhm.
Because going from retail to data analyst, for example, is not the smoothest transition.
It's
But
not.
going from a data analyst of this job that wasn't even super like testing, now you have industry experience. Now you have niche experience. Now all of the things that we say you need to get, now you're now getting in this role. So
Yeah.
by taking that chance, you put yourself in this place where someone can take a chance on you.
I think that's a super valid point. And I want to also add something else I think is super strategic also is even within your role working in retail, you need to be like, especially for a role like data, like retail, there's so much data in the retail space, right? So if you're working in retail, I don't know like what that can potentially look like, but start looking for people that like wrangle data or like any kind of data work at all. And then when you, and this is something that I've helped so many people do. So when you're talking about your responsibilities in your current job, you can confidently say that I did XYZ project, even though your title was like maybe customer support. If you are working in customer support right now, you can start shadowing people that are doing data in your company. Like go make friends with them, ask them what they're doing, what project, volunteer, like just familiarize yourself with what they're doing so that alongside your current responsibilities you can say, hey, I did XYZ in data, I did this in the cloud, I understood this, I understood this, I understood that. That's really another strategy I think really helps when you're transitioning from like retail to like a role like analytics.
And it's so interesting because I was gonna go in that route too, but from a different direction. Like part of the thing that you talked about was like sharing online. And one of the great things you can share potentially is what is your experience in that current space and how are you thinking about it? And one way could be like, you know, you probably working in retail, you probably have different demands at different times of day because during the early hours of the day, people are at work, and then maybe later at night, once they're getting off work, they're coming into the stores to buy stuff and things like that. And maybe like, the numbers look different, right? That curiosity to say, even if you don't have the data for the specific store you work at, I imagine like this data is sitting somewhere, and then you start to run this different analysis and say, oh, based on these things that I know to be true, right? Instinctively, this is how I'm sourcing this data, and I'm looking at like their foot traffic. So, with this degree of confidence, I can say, different people coming at this time. So and nobody has to take that recommendation, but you're already showing what you're going to be doing on the job
Right.
using a specific insight that you have that nobody else is going to have, right?
Right.
Because this person who's hiring if they've never worked in retail, they'll never know what you're talking about.
Mm.
But they will still be fascinated that you can find these patterns and identify them and find data to kind of like make these claims. But if they've even worked in retail, now it's more impressive, right? Because now they can see, and you now have this touch point that's almost deeper than any other candidate, where you can talk about something specifically that you both know, and that can move you forward as a candidate. So I think one of the things that it goes to, which a lot of people struggle with, is because you don't currently work in tech, you have a bit of an imposter syndrome, if for one of a better word. But the way you can flip it is you have something, while you might not have the thing, but you have something that people who in that role don't have. And
Mm.
that's your unique experience. So how can you always figure out ways to convert that into an asset, not a liability, right? So now the fact that you're coming in with a fresh pair of eyes and you notice things become this advantage in itself.
I agree with that. I agree with that completely. And there's also the like one thing that can potentially come out of that is even just transitioning to like a new role within your company. You don't have to like jump ships, right? They could see the value and they were like, yeah, we need something like this on our team. And that can open like doors in that way, right? So I think it's a really good strategy as well.
Yeah, and that's so valid because there's so many people who've come true on the podcast who literally did exactly that. They used to work, whether it's like retail or something like that, or in a different division, and by just showing curiosity, they were able to move, to corporate or a different role within the same company.
That's amazing.
So speaking of like, a lot of the amazing work that you do, I know like you've been in Utiva's top 100 women in tech. You reach over 100,000 people online. You also have, Konnect, which is a tech networking event where you bring in like different experts. I've been privileged to be on one of your panels and just bring people together to talk about technology opportunities, things like that. Why do you do like this really important work?
Um, that's a very good question, actually. Your why is super important. I think for me, it all started with just people asking a ton of questions about what I did for work. When I started sharing content online, it was only a handful of people that talked about tech online. But what really naturally, I'm a creative person. So I used to create content about like anything I was doing, like anywhere, like whatever point in my life, I create content around that. I'm very social media savvy.
Mm,
So when I started working in tech, I used to get a lot of questions about like my job because I was fully remote. And so I did one video with another friend of mine who works at Amazon because normally I created content around like travel and lifestyle and things like that. And so I was like, let's just talk about like my job because the people keep asking what I do for work, right? So like let's make this one video where I just talk about like, hey, I'm a work as a data analyst, whatever, right? And the interest, like so many people were interested in the video, like, oh, you mean you're a data analyst, blah 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 blah. And I'm like, oh wow, this is like a whole thing. I didn't really understand the gap that like a lot of people have until I just made that one very nonchalant video. And so I decided to start a new page and start actively talking about it because I realized it made like, okay, there are a lot of people that actually need this information. Like you feel like, okay, you know this and this is like, but a lot of people don't. And so that's kind of how we started. And then it just became something that I just didn't know how to stop, I guess. And it has grown into like multiple things, the events, like the trainings. It like I don't even know, like so much has happened. It's just really crazy how one video can turn to a whole world of things. But yeah, really that's how we started. I think another thing that has really kept me going is really just my passion.
mm,
I genuinely like love like the medium, the
mhm,
communication medium. I like the message. The reason why it's hard for me to stop talking about data is because it's what I have my expertise in. I've done over the years. But another thing I really enjoy is the way that I communicate that message.
mm,
So through media, through like the creative ways I communicate that message, It's something that is like makes me feel fulfilled, and it's just difficult for me to stop.
Yeah. And you make like super high quality content. Like I'm always jealous when I see your videos like so clean, different locations. I'm like, wow.
That's what I
That's
enjoy
that's a
about it.
that's a professional at work.
No, no, no. The thing is, I try to be very boring and like sit in front of the camera. Like I'm
Mm,
like, this isn't like I wouldn't do content if I had
mm,
to do content that way. Like I
mm,
just I would just stop, right?
mm,
A lot of times the reason I'm not as consistent as I would like is because when I do the content, I'm like, this thing is so boring. Like I wouldn't watch this. You know what I mean?
mm, mm,
So even though I'm trying, and that's why I really like threads, because I feel like okay, I can like dump my brain
mm,
without worrying so much about being like super creative or
mm,
whatever. I think it's a really good video. But for me, like I genuinely there's a strong attachment to my art
mm.
that I have, and it's just like that's one of the reasons I do it.
Yeah, that is really that's a really great why, and helping a lot of people, by the way, in that journey. I think that's really great. So in terms of showing up online, right? Because of course you're an expert at this, so you can give the advice. Um, One of the misconceptions that people have is for you to have impact online, you have to be an influencer. What's that delineation, right? Showing up as a new person coming into tech doesn't equate being an influencer if you don't want to be. So what's the differentiation there?
Um, Personal branding can be different things,
Mm,
right? To me, your why is important, right? Like for me, one of my whys, alongside helping to like um, share my journey, like I have a business as well, and so many other things, is my creative element. The fact that I genuinely like it's fulfilling for me to make those videos, right?
mm,
Um, so you have to understand your why. Some people want to be influencers. That's what they
mm,
want. Some people are business minded people. You have to understand, like everybody online, they are doing different things. There are people who are there to influence and get like brand deals and do like marketing for brands and all that. There are people who are there and they have products, right? They're trying to like, okay, this is my product. I'm trying to build community around my product. People who are interested in XYZ. There are people who are just building a personal brand, and building a personal brand, not influencing, is just like showing the things that you're interested in. Something can come out of it, something doesn't. No, nothing has to come out of it. You know what I mean?
mm,
For people who are like starting out their journey,
mm,
I would say don't focus on being an influencer. You have to focus on like showing your value, not necessarily as an expert because you're starting out, but like more like documenting your process, right? Here's how I am learning XYZ. Here's what I enjoyed about this. That's still personal branding. People still associate you with tech. People still associate you with like whatever you're doing, right? It doesn't have to be like the I think the influence comes with that is an add-on, right?
yep.
Naturally, if you show up online consistently, people would, some, not everyone, some people might gravitate towards your brand and just like
Mm,
grow a likeness for it and a fondness
mm,
and want to support you and want to see you grow and whatever the case may be, right? So that
yep.
naturally comes with you just being consistent online, but you have to know your why, because everybody
Mm,
online, if you notice, like everybody's doing something different. They have a different goal. If your goal is to build an audience, then that's what you're doing. You're trying to be an influencer. If your goal is to build a personal brand, you're doing that. If your goal is to sell your product or build community around your product, that there are also people that do that, and so many other reasons.
that is so cool, and I think you touched to the heart of a few things that I don't want to even skip over or miss. I think one of them is understanding your why, right? Because each of those different people you just described are different. It's almost like an investment, right? Because I read this book, The Psychology of Money, that talks about different people have different reasons why they invest, right? Like if you have you're a fund manager and you have $10 million and you're trying to turn it into 15 in like 6 months, your investment patterns are going to be different from this somebody's retirement fund, they want security. And even if you log into the apps, they literally ask you like, what's your risk appetite? What's your time horizon? What are
Right.
those different things? I think in the same way, the sad part is social media doesn't have that to give you recommendations. So take this recommendation that Ebere is sharing. It's important for you to know what you're looking for. In this case, you probably want recruiters and hiring managers to find you.
Mm-hmm.
So work back from that. Don't come off as an expert because you're not, but you can still be extremely valuable. Why did you struggle to learn how to, complete this operation in Excel? And once you come back with that finished product, can you share that process with us? Can we figure out, oh, this is the thing? And your joy, your passion, your commitment to learning that can literally, because this is one thing that many people overlook. If you're willing to put in the effort, if you're willing to struggle through it, you're probably already way ahead of most of the competition.
True.
And even if that's all you show, like literally, I didn't know this, I put in all this work and now I know this. You show that 20, 25 times. If somebody comes to your timeline and they see that on LinkedIn or Threads or anywhere else where, recruiters are looking to find you, it tells a very, very compelling story. And this is the thing, is like, of course, we live in a world full of haters and things like that. But regardless of anything, people still want to see people succeed. And
Mm-hmm.
there's just something refreshing. If you're an expert, you've been in the game, 10 years, 12 years, whatever that number of years is, and you go there and you see someone at that beginning, there's something that it does to you, like it reminds you of your own struggle, your own journey.
Right.
That is a feeling that you can give people that they can't create on their own. They already know it. They're never gonna struggle in that space. So seeing you go through that journey is refreshing and is extremely valuable. But not enough people even know that.
I think so. I think so. There needs to be a lot of education around how to show up online, because a lot of people, and especially when a lot of the people you see online are experts, you don't know that you don't have to show up as an expert, as someone who's starting out, right? You think you have to show up and say, hey, yeah, no, 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 no. You can actually like be someone who's just documenting their journey. So you said something that's very valid. Social media doesn't tell you, hey, do this if you when you're starting out, right? I think that's something that you can potentially start doing. I think it will help. But yeah, it's crazy. It's so crazy. And the thing about um, the media is that you see people just like embody things from like people that they admire,
Mm,
but you're in a different place. Like what
mm,
they're doing is not going to work for you, right?
mm,
There really is a lot of education that still needs to happen about all of that.
Yep. I agree 1,000%. Um, and I think one more thing that I was even thinking to add there was like, because the opposite is also true, and this is where you can blame people, right? Because a lot of the time, imagine like I was scrolling through my feed and I found your video. And you're talking about all this interesting AI concepts, what you're learning, what you're uncovering, and all these things. But you're coming from an expert perspective. You know the use cases, you know how they apply, and that's what I see. And then I hear show up online. If I don't have any other frame of reference, my goal would be to show up as you.
Like that, yes.
But we're not
We're
even
not in the
in the
same place.
same
Yeah,
place.
yeah.
So which is why it's good again, and this is the value of like podcasts like this, because we can go deeper and share this like really, really unique insights to help people contextualize that information. So show up, but don't show up as that, because the flip side of that is actually very irritating. So there was a guy who I knew on a social platform, not going to mention, this guy literally was telling people to come pay him an exorbitant amount of money to come learn and do this and do X and do Y and do Z. He doesn't even work in the role.
That's crazy.
He's never been in the role. So it's not like, he's taking a career break. No, he's never done it. So probably watched a couple of people. And now he wants to charge for something he doesn't even know.
Okay,
Like that's so hard.
I have a bit of context there. So and this is something I think is going to be a really interesting conversation, because
Uh,
understand that there are people who are salespeople.
huh,
There are people who are like the people who are doers. I think that's
mm,
where the gap, another place where the gap.
mm,
when you talk about a
mm,
proper business, not like a one-man show,
mm,
salesperson's job is not to do. Their job is
mm,
to sell, right?
mm,
They're on there like they don't have to have done it. They need to
mm,
just understand it enough to sell you what they're doing and
mm,
then pass you on to the person who has done it
mm,
can potentially, like, there's a process when it comes to like a proper business, right?
mm,
So
mm,
the thing is, when you see a salesperson, like trying to sell you something, a
mm,
lot of people expect, because from the lens that we've seen a lot of experts on social media,
mm,
they sell you their expertise as well. It doesn't mean that the product is bad.
mm,
It doesn't always equate to it being a bad product. It could
mm.
just be that he's the sales guy. And then once you sign up, you get passed on to someone in the back end who, you know what I mean? It,
Yeah,
it depends on the business model. That there's so many grains to it and how they're going about their business.
and I like that clarification, because if it was that, I would never have a problem with that. Interestingly, like we ran a free boot camp, by the way, in 2021, I think, where we were giving, UX design training. I was the director of program management, work with all the amazing people. So every single, in fact, our director of communication had never worked in tech, right? She was just communicating, but it was backed by actual experts. So that was a whole program. We brought in people. Like, so that's a gamut. I'm never ever gonna knock that.
Mm.
The problem is when you're selling personal expertise or information only, there's nothing backing it up. And now you're saying, because a lot of people gravitate towards your content, because I actually met this person in real life. And it turns out like they're just literally in the journey of trying to break into tech themselves.
Oh wow.
They weren't backed by anybody. They weren't working with anyone. And like they
So
got,
how is the bootcamp actually? Like, who's doing the training? What's the process?
that was the thing. I didn't know like what their plan was, right? So they were finding out somebody who's done this. They had business. They had this. They had that. Like there was this whole stake about it, right? But it wasn't backed by anything. So in that case, like of course, like they're creators, influencers who market all kinds of stuff.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, like oh, and that's the thing. It's like if that's what you're doing, talk about it. Like, oh, I'm working with this group who's doing XYZ. If you sign up, you'll get this, you'll get that. But it's like, oh, come to my coaching program, right? I'm gonna coach you on this thing that I've never done. So that was where, but again, that's even an extreme example to almost say that if you have to understand like where you are in the ecosystem, right?
Mm.
Are you at the top of the food chain where you can give people things? Are you coming up where you need things and you can share that knowledge and your journey and your growth and all of this to get things? Because that's what you attract. Where you don't want to be cut off is passing off as the person who's already made it, because you will naturally rebuff people who would typically want to help you. In fact, one of my first guests on the podcast talked about like how he went to San Francisco and just pulled out his phone and was saying, oh, they told me to come here. Like, I'm here. So I'm trying to get interviews. He got interviews at Microsoft, Facebook, and a bunch of other companies off of that video that he shared online. When
Oh,
you show up authentically as this is me, they can set context. Oh, this guy's very driven. He doesn't know yet. He's finished a boot camp. He's done this. They can put you in the right context for you to succeed. But if you pass off as this expert, when they talk to you, they will tell immediately that you're not. So that's the danger.
I think that has also created a lot of distrust and just like I've noticed, especially around boot camps, which honestly, as someone who does a boot camp myself, I like it's just such a sensitive topic.
Mm,
And I know a lot of people have like a lot of fear around it and this and that. And it's really it's something that I think is necessary because you obviously want to help people and give them the skills that they need. But it's just sad that the
mm.
way the whole ecosystem has kind of played out. That's just what it is. It really is what it is.
And this is what I'll say to kind of like counter that, right? Because for anyone watching, boot camps are still one of the best ways to get into tech. And I'm not saying it because Ebere is a boot camp per owner. I say because it works. The model literally works. So
Yeah.
Esco, for example, who's one of the most respected voices in like this indie get into tech journey, is a Airbnb person who makes a ton of money, right? He has a group. He's been running this thing for ages. People like that, they've helped tons and tons of people get into tech. This is why boot camps are so important, to kind of like contextualize it. Think about it this way: there's a lot of people who get into tech by just, figuring out on their own, going the indie route, struggling through the pain, and getting a job. That's the hard way to do it. And if you're committed, yeah, kudos to you. But the flip side of that is, one, you're not going to have a structured learning, meaning that you're going to be learning every single thing at once, and you will spend a lot of wasted effort learning the things that may not be relevant in this current moment that you're in. Bootcamp gives you that structure. The other negative is, a lot of the times you can also maybe find like the Discord channels and this and that. You don't get that peer-to-peer mentoring that's also very useful in the journey. A bootcamp typically that will have other people in it already just automatically gives you that, meaning you have a yardstick,
Right.
and also
You have community already.
Instantly. And now that same community, by the time they're applying to jobs, getting interviews, you can always piggyback off of each other, right? That's another value there. Another thing is, the things that you struggle with, if you're learning on your own, you have to probably watch a ton and ton of video to figure it out. This could just be a Zoom session where you guys get together beyond even whatever content is in the boot camp for you guys to figure out. So you get structured learning, you get community, you get support, you get all of these things, and that is the value. But just like anything else, like even if you think about like the oldest thing, like church, for example, there's good churches and there's bad churches,
They're bad,
right?
but it doesn't
So
mean the
it,
idea is bad.
it doesn't break the idea. So that's why like you have to do a lot of research, right? Like who's backing this thing, and for people like, and that's the thing. It's like, when, like for example, like I'm picky about who comes to the podcast, right? Like it's the same thing. You have to do your own research, because I don't want to bring someone like literally like we've talked to people in the past where, when we did some more background on them, they just turned out to be people who just say things, but it's not really backed up by anything, right? So
Mhm.
that's the thing. It's like you can literally tell, where has this person worked? What do they know? What is this? What is that? By the time you bring all that context together, you have a full picture about who this person is and how they're able to help, and how they're able to help. And you can leverage online tools to figure out pricing. So this is my model typically, right? If you want to go into a boot camp, I would typically say, because you're more likely not to have high income. So I want the boot camp to be affordable. I want to maybe see other people who've gone to the boot camp and see the results. I want to see the quality of the people who are doing the program, because I imagine just even being in the proximity alone, I can get value. So if you kind of like check it off, you can usually get a lot of stuff. I think people get into bad situations because they're not doing that research enough. And I think that's just a general rule of thumb. Anything you want to do in tech, you have to do the research. You have to do the research.
Anything in life, period, you have to do the research. You just have to. I agree with you. I agree with you on like doing your due diligence, even with like I feel like one of the things where I am right now, like my head isn't so focused on breaking into tech. I feel like I'm more of an entrepreneur now, where like I'm focused more like building like products and things like that. And even with that, I've still fallen into situations where people would tell you, hey, we can help you do XYZ marketing, and you still like it's actually a sham, right? So it's not even just with breaking to tech. It's across the board where there's so many people that are bad at different things. And sometimes you just take a risk and then you have a bad return. Other times you take a risk and it's like, oh, this thing actually just works. So do your research. Do your research. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I agree 1,000%. So I know we're a little over time, and this is usually the time where we, do shout out or anything. So if you have anything you want them to check out, first of all, before you say, I want to say Nelotechie, that's a username on most of the platforms. She does amazing stuff. She gives amazing advice. Go follow her everywhere. We're gonna link it in the comment below. If you're interested in data, all of the data spheres, data engineering, data analytics, data scientists, you can always learn something. You're scrolling social media all day, looking at 5 videos and all this stuff. Watch something that's gonna benefit you.
Right, right.
So, was that something you want to shout out specifically?
I am now. I think the best way to kind of connect with me would be my newsletter. Now that's what we're kind of prioritizing, just like growing the community there. I do have social media, different communities across multiple channels. So I have Instagram. I'm now getting into LinkedIn. I feel like I'm a little late to the LinkedIn. I actually am enjoying LinkedIn. So I feel like every time I say that, I feel like I'm so old. But I am enjoying LinkedIn now. So that's actually a really good place to connect with me.
Yeah.
I have a YouTube channel, more tutorial like stuff on YouTube, and I have a TikTok as well. So yeah, go ahead and follow me. Yeah.
Yeah, follow everywhere. Check out the newsletter. And it's interesting that you say that, because that's something that I'm also prioritizing this year as well. It's like newsletters.
Yeah, yeah. I think with the whole social media, AI generated content, like I think that's what everyone should prioritize. Like just grow something that you can own, right?
Yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep.
I recommend that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming and chatting with us. I really, really enjoyed this, and look forward um to all of the amazing stuff that you're doing. Wish you all the best. And if you also want to get into data, get into a boot camp, I think you should consider talking to her about that as well, and see how she can help. That's been the show for today. You know how we do this every Thursday, but next week, I think we're probably doing it on a Tuesday, maybe. But definitely locking with us everywhere so that you don't miss this. This has been another amazing episode of the Working in Tech podcast. We'll see you again next time.
All right. Bye, everyone.